On the night of August 3rd, 1969, at the International Hotel in Las Vegas, Dean Martin stood at a microphone and said 7 words that would change Elvis Presley's life. "Let's see if the king still reigns." It was meant as a joke, a bit of friendly ribbing between two legends, but what happened next, the mockery, the humiliation, and Elvis's response, became the most talked about moment in Vegas history. This is the story of the night Elvis Presley was challenged, mocked, and counted out, and how his comeback didn't just silence the room, it redefined what it meant to be a legend. Las Vegas, August 1969. Elvis Presley was about to make his return to live performance after 8 years of making forgettable movies in Hollywood. 8 years. Nearly a decade since he'd stood on a stage and performed for a real audience. The world had changed during those years. The Beatles had conquered. The Stones had shocked. Dylan had revolutionized. And Elvis? Elvis had made Clambake and Speedway and 24 other movies that nobody remembered a week after they came out. Now, at 34 years old, with his career at its lowest point, Elvis was attempting the impossible, a comeback in Las Vegas, the city that had rejected him in 1956 and called him too raw for their sophisticated audiences. The International Hotel had just opened, the largest hotel in the world, with a showroom that seated 2,000 people. Elvis had been booked for a 4-week engagement starting August 1st. The pressure was enormous. If he failed, it was over. No more chances, no more comebacks. Dean Martin knew all this. He'd been performing in Vegas for 15 years. He owned the city, along with Sinatra and Sammy. The Rat Pack had turned Vegas into an adult playground, a place where cool reigned supreme and rock and roll was considered kid stuff. On August 3rd, Dean was at the International Hotel for a charity event, a benefit concert for the Las Vegas Children's Hospital. The organizers had put together a variety show featuring multiple performers. Dean was headlining, and Elvis, still 3 days away from his own opening night, had been invited to perform a song or two as a warm-up, a preview of his upcoming show. It seemed like a great idea, low stakes, friendly crowd, good publicity, but nobody had anticipated what would actually happen. Dean arrived at the hotel at 7 p.m., 3 hours before showtime. He was in his dressing room, having a drink with Sammy Davis Jr., when the event organizer, a nervous man named Phil Keller, knocked on the door. "Dean, we've got a situation." "What kind of situation?" "It's Elvis. He's really nervous, like really nervous. I've never seen anyone this worked up before a performance." Dean shrugged. First time back on stage in 8 years. Makes sense he'd be nervous. "It's more than that. He keeps asking if he should change his set, if he should do different songs, if his outfit is wrong. He's spiraling, Dean, and I'm worried he's going to cancel." Sammy looked at Dean. "You want to talk to him?" Dean considered it. He and Elvis had met a few times over the years. Cordial, but never close. Different generations, different styles, different worlds. "Yeah, okay," Dean said. "Where is he?" Phil led Dean down the corridor to Elvis's dressing room. Dean could hear voices through the door. Elvis and his people arguing about something. Dean knocked. The voices stopped. Someone opened the door. One of Elvis's guys, a big man in a suit who looked like he could bench press a car. "Dean Martin to see Elvis," Dean said. The man stepped aside. Dean walked into a room that was somehow both chaotic and tense. Elvis was standing in the center, wearing a black leather outfit that looked like something out of a Western. His hair was perfect, his face was pale, and his hands were shaking. "Dean," Elvis said, his southern accent thicker than Dean remembered. "Good to see you." "You too, Elvis. I heard you might be getting cold feet." Elvis's entourage shifted uncomfortably. Elvis forced a smile. Just trying to get it right, you know. Mind if we talk, just us?" Elvis nodded. His people filed out, leaving Dean and Elvis alone. Dean sat down, gestured for Elvis to do the same. What's really going on? Elvis was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You ever feel like the world moved on without you?" "Every day," Dean said honestly. I've been making movies for 8 years, singing to girls on beaches, racing cars, playing cowboys, and every movie was worse than the last. And the whole time I'm watching the Beatles and the Stones and Dylan, and I'm thinking, they are doing what I should be doing. They're changing music, they're changing culture, and I'm singing Do the Clam. Dean didn't say anything, just listened. This is my shot, Elvis continued, his 4-week engagement. If I fail, that's it. I'm done. I'll be the guy who used to be somebody, the has-been who made stupid movies and couldn't cut it when it mattered. So don't fail. It's not that simple, Dean. Look at this audience out there tonight. It's a charity event. That means Vegas elite, Sinatra people, your people, cool, sophisticated people who think rock and roll is for teenagers. How am I supposed to win them over? Dean thought about it. You win them over by being yourself, by showing them why you became Elvis Presley in the first place. What if myself isn't good enough anymore? Then you're screwed, Dean said bluntly. But I don't think that's true. I think you're scared because it's been 8 years, and you're out of practice, and you don't know if you've still got it. But Elvis, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I can tell you the talent doesn't go away. The fear goes away. The doubt goes away. But the talent, that stays. Elvis looked at him with something like hope. You really believe that? I know it. Now stop overthinking and just go out there and sing. Elvis nodded slowly. Thanks, Dean. I appreciate it. Dean stood up to leave, but as he reached the door, something made him turn around. Maybe it was the look on Elvis's face. Maybe it was his own sense of mischief. Maybe it was just bad judgment. Tell you what, Dean said. How about we make this interesting? What do you mean? I'll introduce you tonight, but I'm going to challenge you. Publicly, see if you can still deliver. Call it motivation. Elvis's eyes narrowed. What kind of challenge? I'll leave it vague, just enough to put some pressure on. Make it feel like you've got something to prove. Because honestly, Elvis, you perform better when you're fighting for it. Everyone does. You think I need pressure? I'm already terrified. You need purpose. Right now you're scared of failing. But if I challenge you, you'll be focused on proving me wrong. Trust me, that's better. Elvis thought about it. Okay, challenge me. But Dean, make it good. Don't go easy on me just because you're being nice. Dean smiled. Oh, don't worry, I won't. At 10 p.m., the charity concert began. The showroom was packed with 2,000 people. Vegas high rollers, celebrities, politicians. Frank Sinatra was there, Cary Grant, Red Skelton. The cream of old Hollywood and old Vegas. The show opened with a comedian, then a magician, then a dancer. All professional, all polished, all forgettable. At 10:45, Dean Martin was introduced. He walked on stage to thunderous applause. This was his crowd, his city, his era. Dean sang That's Amore, told jokes about drinking, charmed everyone effortlessly. Then, after his third song, he set down his drink and addressed the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a special treat for you tonight. As you know, the International Hotel has booked Elvis Presley for a 4-week engagement starting this Friday, and Elvis has graciously agreed to give us a preview tonight. Perform a couple songs, shake off the rust, remember what it's like to stand in front of a real audience instead of a Hollywood camera crew. Polite laughter, but Dean noticed something. The audience seemed skeptical, uncertain. Elvis Presley, the guy who made beach movies, what was he doing in Vegas? Dean felt it. The resistance. The generational divide. These people had come to see Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr., Vegas royalty. They hadn't come for Elvis. And that's when Dean made a decision. A decision he'd later question 100 times. Now, I've got to be honest with you folks, Dean continued. Elvis hasn't performed live in 8 years. 8 years! That's a long time. The last time he was on stage, Kennedy was president. We didn't have color TV. The Beatles hadn't even come to America yet. More laughter. But it was edged with something else now. Mockery. The audience was being invited to doubt Elvis before he even appeared. So I thought we'd make this interesting, Dean said. I challenged Elvis backstage. I said, Elvis, you call yourself the king, but kings need to prove they deserve their throne. So tonight, let's see if you've still got it. Let's see if the king still reigns. The audience murmured with interest. This was getting good. Elvis accepted the challenge, Dean continued. So here's the deal. He's going to come out here and perform. And we, Dean gestured to the audience, we're going to be the judges. We're going to see if 8 years of making movies killed the rock and roll star. We're going to see if Elvis Presley can still deliver. Dean paused for effect. Ladies and gentlemen, the king of rock and roll. Elvis Presley. The lights dimmed. The band started playing, and Elvis walked onto the stage. He looked incredible, all in black leather, lean and focused. But Dean could see the fear in his eyes, could see his hands trembling slightly as he took the microphone. The applause was polite, lukewarm, nothing like the reception Dean had received. Elvis stood at the microphone, looking out at 2,000 skeptical faces, and for a moment, Dean thought Elvis might freeze, might crack under the pressure. Then Elvis spoke. "Thank you, Dean," Elvis said, his voice quiet, almost shy. That was quite an introduction. A few chuckles from the audience. 8 years, Elvis continued. Dean's right about that. It's been 8 years since I stood on a stage like this. 8 years of making movies that, well, let's just say they weren't Casablanca. More laughter, self-deprecating, humble. So yeah, I'm nervous, Elvis admitted. I'm terrified, actually. Because this audience, you folks, you're used to the best. You're used to Dean and Frank and Sammy. You're used to sophistication and class and cool. And me? I'm just a kid from Memphis who shakes his hips and sings too loud. The audience was listening now, really listening. But Dean challenged me, Elvis said. Asked if the king still reigns. And you know what? That's a fair question. I've been asking myself the same thing for 8 years. He paused, looked out at the audience. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to try to be Dean Martin. I'm not going to try to be Frank Sinatra. I'm going to be Elvis Presley, for better or worse, and we'll see if that's enough. Elvis turned to the band. Let's do Blue Suede Shoes. It was a safe choice, a classic, one of Elvis's early hits. The band kicked in and Elvis started to sing, but something was wrong. He sounded tentative, unsure, like he was holding back. The audience sat politely, but Dean could feel their disappointment. This wasn't electric. This wasn't dangerous. This was just... ... Fine. And then someone laughed. It came from one of the tables near the front, a man in an expensive suit talking to his companion loud enough to be heard. This is what we're supposed to be excited about? My grandfather performs better than this. A few people nearby laughed. Not cruel laughter, just, dismissive, like Elvis was a relic, a nostalgia act, nothing special. Dean saw Elvis hear it, saw him falter for just a second, saw the flash of humiliation cross his face. Elvis finished Blue Suede Shoes to scattered applause. He looked out at the audience, and Dean could see it in his eyes. This was a disaster. The comeback was failing before it had even started. Elvis gripped the microphone. His jaw was tight. His eyes were hard. "You know what?" Elvis said, his voice suddenly different, stronger. Angrier. "You're right. That was terrible. I was trying to be safe, trying not to offend anyone, trying to fit into your idea of what Vegas should be." The audience went quiet, uncertain where this was going. "But here's the thing," Elvis continued. "I didn't become Elvis Presley by playing it safe. I didn't change music by being polite. And I sure as hell didn't scare your parents half to death in the 50s by doing what everyone expected." He turned to his band. "Give me my guitar." Someone handed Elvis a guitar. He strapped it on, adjusted it, then looked back at the audience. "Dean challenged me to prove I still deserve to be called the king, so let me show you what the king actually does." Elvis struck a chord on the guitar, hard, loud. Then he launched into Hound Dog. But this wasn't the Hound Dog from the records. This was raw, aggressive, dangerous. Elvis wasn't singing it, he was attacking it. His voice growled and soared. His body moved with a power and sexuality that reminded everyone why he'd been called dangerous in the first place. The audience sat up. This was different. Elvis finished Hound Dog and immediately transitioned into All Shook Up. Then Don't Be Cruel. Then Jailhouse Rock. He wasn't giving them time to clap, wasn't giving them time to judge. He was just performing. pouring everything, all the frustration of 8 wasted years, all the fear of failure, all the anger at being dismissed, into the music. And something extraordinary happened. The audience stopped being polite, stopped being skeptical. They started reacting, clapping, cheering. By the time Elvis hit the bridge of Jailhouse Rock, people were on their feet. Dean watched from the wings, stunned. This was Elvis Presley. This was why he terrified parents and thrilled teenagers. This was the raw talent that had changed American music. Elvis finished Jailhouse Rock, and the audience exploded. Real applause now, real excitement. But Elvis wasn't done. He held up a hand, quieting them. You know, everyone thinks I only do rock and roll, but the truth is I grew up on gospel, on blues, on country, on all kinds of music that most people never heard me sing because they were too busy putting me in movies where I played cowboys and race car drivers. He sat down on a stool that someone had brought out, picked up his guitar. I'm going to sing you something my mama used to sing to me when I was a kid. It's called How Great Thou Art. The audience went silent. This was unexpected. Elvis Presley singing a gospel hymn. Elvis started to sing. And what came out was so pure, so powerful, so filled with genuine emotion that it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. His voice soared on the chorus. Then sings, my soul, my Savior God to thee. And it wasn't a performance anymore. It was a confession, a prayer, a man pouring his heart out in front of 2,000 strangers. When he finished, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the audience erupted, not polite applause, not impressed acknowledgement, but genuine, overwhelming, standing ovation. People were crying. Cary Grant was on his feet. Frank Sinatra was nodding appreciatively. Even the man who'd mocked Elvis earlier was standing and clapping. Elvis stood up, tears in his eyes, and bowed. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you." He looked toward the wings, found Dean standing there. Dean Martin challenged me tonight, asked if the king still reigns, and I think the answer is yes, but not because I'm the same king I was in 1955. I'm a different king now, older, hopefully wiser, more honest, more real. He turned back to the audience. This Friday, I start a 4-week engagement here at the International, and I promise that I'm going to give you everything I've got. No movies, no scripts, no phony characters, just me, just the music, just the truth. The applause continued. People were shouting, "Whistling!" Elvis walked off stage. As he passed Dean in the wings, he stopped. "You challenged me?" Elvis said. "I did," Dean admitted. "And then they mocked me." They did. "Did you know that would happen?" Dean was quiet for a moment. "I thought it might. I'm sorry, Elvis. I was trying to motivate you, but I might have pushed too hard." Elvis looked at him. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "Don't apologize. You were right. I needed that. I needed to be angry. I needed to feel like I had something to prove. Because when I was playing it safe, I was dying up there. But when I got mad, when I stopped trying to please everyone and just performed, that's when it worked." He extended his hand. Dean shook it. "For the challenge. For the motivation. For believing I could still do it. I never doubted you," Dean said. "I just thought you needed to remember who you were." Elvis nodded. "I think I just did." At Elvis Presley's opening night at the International Hotel on August 1st, 1969 became legendary. But insiders always said that the real opening night was August 3rd, the charity concert where Elvis was challenged, mocked, and then delivered one of the greatest performances of his career. The August 1st show sold out. So did the August 2nd show, and the 3rd, and every show for the entire 4-week engagement. The reviews were incredible. Critics who'd written Elvis off as a has-been suddenly called him vital. "Elvis is back," wrote the Las Vegas Review-Journal, "and he's better than ever." But what the public didn't know was how close Elvis had come to canceling that entire engagement, how the charity concert on August 3rd had been his last chance to prove to himself that he could still perform, how Dean's challenge and the mockery that followed had forced Elvis to make a choice: give up or fight back. The night after the charity concert, Elvis called Dean at 2 a.m. "Did I just hallucinate what happened tonight?" Elvis asked. Dean, groggy from sleep, said, "Which part?" "The part where I almost quit. The part where that asshole laughed at me. The part where I stopped trying to be safe and just... perform, Happened," Dean confirmed. "I need to do that again. Tomorrow night. Opening night. I need to channel that anger, that energy. But Dean, I'm afraid I won't be able to find it again. That it was a one-time thing." Dean sat up in bed, fully awake now. "Elvis, you want to know the secret to performing? It's not about being angry every night. It's about being honest. Tonight, you were honest. You stopped pretending to be what you thought people wanted and just showed them who you really were. Do that tomorrow. Do that every night, and you'll be fine. What if I freeze? What if I can't? Then you'll freeze, and you'll recover, and you'll keep going. That's what professionals do. But Elvis, you're not going to freeze. You're going to walk out there, and you're going to remember what it felt like tonight when you stopped caring what anyone thought and just performed. And that feeling? That's what's going to carry you through." Elvis was quiet for a long moment. "Thanks, Dean. I needed to hear that." "Any time, kid. Now go to sleep. You've got a big night tomorrow." August 1st, 1969. Opening night. Elvis walked onto the International Hotel stage at 10 p.m. sharp, wearing a white jumpsuit that would become iconic. The showroom was packed, 2,000 people, including every major entertainment reporter on the West Coast. This was it. This was the moment that would define whether Elvis's comeback was real or just a fluke. Elvis grabbed the microphone and said, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first show of what I hope will be a long engagement here at the International Hotel." He paused, looked out at the audience. "3 nights ago, I performed at a charity concert here. Dean Martin challenged me to prove I was still the king. And honestly, I almost failed that challenge. I almost let fear win. But something happened during that performance. I remembered who I was. I remembered why I started doing this in the first place. Not for the fame, not for the money, but because music, real, honest music, is the only thing I've ever been truly good at." The audience was silent, listening. "So tonight," Elvis continued, "I'm not going to try to be Frank Sinatra. I'm not going to try to be Dean Martin. I'm going to be Elvis Presley. And we'll see if that's enough." He launched into blue suede shoes, but this time there was no hesitation, no fear, just pure, raw performance. The crowd erupted. For the next 90 minutes, Elvis performed like a man possessed. He sang rock and roll, gospel, blues, ballads. He told stories between songs. He joked with the audience. He was vulnerable, powerful, charismatic, real. When he finished with "Can't Help Falling in Love," the audience gave him a 10-minute standing ovation. Critics would later call it one of the greatest concert performances they'd ever witnessed. And it all traced back to that charity concert, to Dean's challenge, to the mockery, to Elvis's decision to fight back. The engagement was extended. 4 weeks became 8 weeks. 8 weeks became a residency. Over the next 7 years, Elvis would perform more than 600 concerts in Las Vegas, cementing his comeback and creating a new template for how major artists could dominate a single venue. But more than that, Elvis had rediscovered himself. The movies had made him rich, but hollow. Vegas made him whole again. Every night, he could stand on that stage and be authentic, be real, be the performer he'd always been meant to be. Of course, it wasn't always perfect. There were off nights, nights when Elvis was exhausted or sick or just not feeling it. But even on those nights, he pushed through. Because he'd learned something crucial from that charity concert. Showing up is half the battle. Being authentic is the other half. Do those 2 things, and the rest takes care of itself. Dean came to see Elvis perform several times during those first few months. After one particularly powerful show in October 1969, they sat in Elvis's dressing room, drinking and talking. "You know what's funny?" Elvis said. "I'm making less money here than I made doing movies. The Colonel negotiated this deal and he screwed it up like he screws up everything. But I don't care, Because this, he gestured around the room, meaning the stage, the performances, the whole Vegas experience. This is what I was meant to do. You sound happy, Dean observed. I am happy. For the first time in 8 years, I'm actually happy. And it's because I stopped trying to please everyone and just started being myself. Dean raised his glass. To being yourself. Elvis clinked glasses. To challenges that make us better. They drank. Then Elvis said, "You know, I've been thinking about that night. The charity concert. When you challenged me? Yeah, I was angry at you. When that guy laughed, when people were dismissing me, I thought you'd set me up, thought you wanted me to fail. And now? Now, I think you knew exactly what would happen. I think you knew I needed to be pushed, needed to be challenged, needed to feel like I had something to prove. Because when I was playing it safe, I was dying. But when I got angry, when I stopped caring what people thought, that's when I came alive." Dean shook his head. "Elvis, I didn't know what would happen. I took a gamble. And honestly, it could have gone very wrong. You could have frozen, could have bombed, could have had your confidence destroyed instead of rebuilt. But it didn't go wrong. It went right. This time. But Elvis, you can't rely on external challenges forever. Eventually, you need to challenge yourself, push yourself, demand more from yourself than anyone else does." Elvis nodded slowly. "You're right. But that night taught me something important. I'm at my best when I'm fighting for it, when I'm proving something, when I'm refusing to accept what people expect and instead showing them what I'm actually capable of. Just make sure you're fighting for the right reasons," Dean said. "Fight to be better, not just to prove people wrong. Fight to grow, not just to win. Fight to be authentic, not just to be admired." "That sounds exhausting," Dean laughed. "It is, but it's also the only way to do this job and not lose yourself." The conversation stuck with Elvis. In the years that followed, as his Vegas residency continued and expanded, he kept Dean's words in mind. He pushed himself to try new songs, new arrangements, new ways of connecting with audiences. He didn't always succeed, but he always tried. And when he did fail, when he had a bad show or a rough night, he'd remember the charity concert, remember the mockery, remember the choice he'd made to fight back instead of giving up. That memory became his anchor, his reminder that he'd already survived his worst moment on stage. Everything else was just maintenance. But the toll of constant performing, constant pressure, constant expectation wore on Elvis. By the mid-70s, the grueling schedule, sometimes 2 shows a night, multiple weeks in a row, was killing him. His health deteriorated, his weight fluctuated, his dependence on prescription drugs worsened. Dean saw it happening. Everyone did, but nobody knew how to stop it. Elvis was trapped in a cycle of his own making, needing to perform to feel alive, but performing so much that it was destroying him. In 1976, Dean visited Elvis backstage after a show. Elvis looked exhausted. His jumpsuit was soaked with sweat. His face was puffy. "You need to take a break," Dean said bluntly. "Can't. I've got shows booked through next year. Cancel them. The Colonel will never allow it. And besides, what would I do if I wasn't performing? Sit at Graceland and watch TV? This is all I have, Dean. This is all I'm good at." "That's not true. You're a father, a friend, a human being. You're more than just a performer." Elvis smiled sadly. "When did you become such a philosopher?" "When I watched you kill yourself for an audience. Elvis, that charity concert in '69, I challenged you because I thought you needed motivation. I didn't challenge you so you'd perform yourself to death. I'm not dying." "Yes, you are, and everyone can see it except you." Elvis was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "The thing is, Dean, I don't know how to be anything else. Performing is the only time I feel real, the only time I feel like I matter. Take that away, and what's left?" Dean didn't have an answer, because he understood. He'd felt the same way his entire career. The stage was where they came alive. Everything else was just waiting to get back on stage. It was the curse of being a performer, the addiction that no rehab could cure. But it all traced back to that night, to Dean's challenge, to the mockery, to Elvis's comeback that had been so spectacular, so powerful, so defining that it had set him on a path he couldn't escape from. Dean and Elvis became friends after that. real friends. They'd have dinner when Elvis was in town. They'd talk about music, about performing, about the pressure of being a legend. One night in 1971, over drinks at the International, Elvis brought up the challenge. "You know what the best part of that night was?" Elvis asked. "What?" "When that guy laughed at me. When he said his grandfather could perform better. That moment right there, that was the moment I stopped being scared and started being angry. And anger is so much more useful than fear." "Anger's dangerous, though," Dean said. "You can't perform on anger every night." "No," Elvis agreed, "but you can perform on confidence, and that night gave me my confidence back. It reminded me that I don't need everyone to like me. I just need to be authentic, to be real, to stop hiding behind the safe choices and actually perform." Dean raised his glass. To authenticity. Elvis clinked glasses. To challenges that make us better. In 1977, when Elvis died at age 42, Dean Martin was one of the honorary pallbearers at his funeral. He stood there, looking at the casket, thinking about that night in 1969, thinking about the challenge, the mockery, the comeback. After the funeral, a reporter asked Dean about his friendship with Elvis. "We were from different generations," Dean said, "different styles, different worlds, but we understood each other. We both knew what it was like to be doubted, to be dismissed, to have to prove yourself over and over again. Is it true you challenged Elvis at a charity concert in 1969, the reporter asked. Dean smiled. "I might have pushed him a little, but Elvis didn't need me to make him great. He was always great. He just needed to remember it." "Do you regret challenging him? Setting up a situation where he was mocked?" Dean thought about it. "Every day. But Elvis once told me that mockery was the best thing that ever happened to him, that it woke him up, made him fight. So maybe it was necessary. Maybe we all need to be challenged, to be doubted, to be pushed to our limits, because that's where we find out what we're really made of." In 1977, when Elvis died at age 42, Dean Martin was one of the honorary pallbearers at his funeral. He stood there, looking at the casket, thinking about that night in 1969, thinking about the challenge, the mockery, the comeback, and for the first time, Dean wondered if he'd done the right thing. The challenge had worked. It had motivated Elvis, had given him the push he needed to rediscover himself, but it had also set Elvis on a path that maybe, just maybe, had contributed to his early death. The constant performing, the pressure to always be great, the need to prove himself, night after night after night. Had Dean's challenge helped Elvis, or had it hurt him? After the funeral, a reporter asked Dean about his friendship with Elvis. "We were from different generations," Dean said, "different styles, different worlds, but we understood each other. We both knew what it was like to be doubted, to be dismissed, to have to prove yourself over and over again. Is it true you challenged Elvis at a charity concert in 1969? The reporter asked. Dean smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I might have pushed him a little, but Elvis didn't need me to make him great. He was always great. He just needed to remember it." "Do you regret challenging him, setting up a situation where he was mocked?" Dean thought about it for a long time. The cameras waited. The reporters waited. Finally, he said, "Every day. But Elvis once told me that mockery was the best thing that ever happened to him, that it woke him up, made him fight, so maybe it was necessary. Maybe we all need to be challenged, to be doubted, to be pushed to our limits, because that's where we find out what we're really made of." And what was Elvis made of? "Greatness," Dean said simply. "Pure, undeniable greatness." He just had to stop hiding from it. But privately, Dean wrestled with guilt. Had his challenge been a gift or a curse? Had it saved Elvis's career or destroyed his life? There was no way to know, no way to separate the good from the bad, the helpful from the harmful. All Dean knew was that on August 3rd, 1969, he'd challenged Elvis Presley to prove he was still the king. And Elvis had accepted that challenge, had risen to it, had delivered one of the greatest performances of his career. Everything that came after, the residency, the success, the toll it took, that was Elvis's choice, Elvis's path. Elvis's life to live and his burden to carry. Dean couldn't take credit for the triumphs, and he wouldn't accept blame for the tragedy, but he'd always wonder, always question, always carry the weight of those 7 words. Let's see if the king still reigns. Because words have power. Challenges have consequences, and sometimes the thing that saves someone can also destroy them. That's the paradox of greatness. That's the price of being extraordinary. That's what it means to be a legend. You burn bright, you burn hot, and sometimes, inevitably, you burn out. But what a fire it was while it lasted. And what was Elvis made of? Greatness, Dean said simply. Pure, undeniable greatness. He just had to stop hiding from it. The story of that night became Vegas legend. Young performers would ask older performers about it. Is it true Dean Martin challenged Elvis Presley? Is it true Elvis was booed? And the old-timers would correct them. He wasn't booed. He was mocked. There's a difference. Booing is rejection. Mockery is dismissal. Mockery says you're not even worth the energy of real criticism. And that's worse. That's what makes you either break or fight back. Elvis had fought back, and in fighting back, he'd created one of the greatest comebacks in entertainment history. The '68 comeback special is often cited as the moment Elvis returned to relevance. But those who were there that night in 1969 knew the truth. The real comeback happened at a charity concert, when Elvis was challenged, mocked, and forced to decide whether to give up or to dig deep and show the world who he really was. He chose to fight. And in fighting, he reminded everyone, including himself, why he'd been called the king in the first place. Dean Martin's 7 words, "Let's see if the king still reigns," were meant as motivation. But they became something more. They became the catalyst for one of the most important performances in rock and roll history. Because sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone isn't encouragement or support. Sometimes it's a challenge, a push, a moment of doubt that forces them to prove to themselves and everyone else what they're truly capable of. Dean gave Elvis that moment. And Elvis, in return, gave the world a reminder of what authentic, powerful, fearless performance looked like. That's not just a comeback. That's a revelation. And it started with 7 words, a challenge, and the courage to stop playing it safe and just be real. In 2002, 25 years after Elvis's death and 7 years after Dean's, the International Hotel, renamed the Las Vegas Hilton by then, put up a plaque commemorating that night. It reads, "On this stage, August 3, 1969, Elvis Presley was challenged to prove he was still the king. His response reminded the world that true legends don't fade, they evolve." This performance launched Elvis's Vegas residency and changed the future of live entertainment. Let's see if the king still reigns. He did. He does. He always will. The plaque hangs in the showroom's green room, where every performer can see it before they go on stage. A reminder that challenges aren't obstacles, they're opportunities, and that sometimes the best thing anyone can do for you is make you prove yourself. Because when you do, when you dig deep and show the world what you're really made of, you don't just silence the room, you change it forever.